Hey everybody, welcome to Algo Expert. In this video, we're going to answer the following question. Describe a time when you strongly disagreed with a coworker about an engineering decision. How did you go about making the final decision? What did you do after the decision was made? So there have been many times when I've disagreed with coworkers. When I was at Google, when I was at Facebook, and especially now that I'm running Algo Expert full-time. And oftentimes these have been pretty big disagreements, especially now on Algo Expert, because the engineering disagreements that we usually have big product ramifications, so they end up being product disagreements as well, and even, business disagreements, if that makes sense. Now, I do think that it's less meaningful for me to focus on a particular disagreement that I've had, as much as it is to focus on the general system or process that I follow when we have disagreements. So that's what I'm going to focus on here. And the process that I follow really has 3 steps. And they're actually kind of inspired by some of the leadership principles at Amazon, if you're familiar with those. So the first step, which is one of the Amazon leadership principles, I think, is to dig deep, to really try to understand every person who's part of the disagreement, all of their ideas, their arguments, and their stances. You have to understand why someone you're disagreeing with, why they came to the conclusion that they came to. And they have to understand why and how you came to your conclusion. As an example, let's say someone wants to change a piece of code and you don't want to change that piece of code. You disagree with their change. You have to understand, why are they changing that piece of code? Is it because they think it'll be better? Okay, probably. But why is it going to be better? Is it because it'll be stylistically better? Okay. Is it because it'll be more performant? Okay, that's another option. Is it because it'll be something that they just prefer, they have a personal preference? Is it because it'll be more consistent with the code base? You see, there are a lot of different reasons for which someone might think a piece of code is going to be better. You have to understand that. And then once you get to that answer, you continue asking why. You continue dissecting the idea. Well, why do we want to be consistent with the rest of our code base? Why do we want to be more performant? Do we want to be more performant? And again, here in this trivial example, this might seem kind of silly, but in a larger, feature, or in a larger decision or disagreement, this might make a lot of sense, because someone might have a completely different idea precisely because they think that performance doesn't matter for this particular feature. So, super important, dissect people's ideas, try to find loopholes in their arguments, just because that'll lead you to a better decision. And that might sway other people one way or another. Now, one very important aspect of this process here is that you do not want to attack people. You want to attack ideas. Attacking people is toxic, it's unhealthy, it's not professional, you don't want to do that. You want to attack ideas. And what that means is that you have to make sure you're not attacking people, but you also have to make sure that when people are attacking your ideas, you don't take that personally. So these are kind of important things that every individual in the disagreement has to kind of internalize for this to actually work. But so that was the first step. You dig deep, really try to understand why people are coming to the conclusions that they're coming to. The second step is to take a step back and to kind of see things from a higher level, from a higher perspective, because oftentimes the environment that you're in, the ecosystem that you're in, maybe the company's current stance or point in time, that might influence the engineering decision. There have been many times on Algo Expert where we had, a disagreement on an engineering decision. If you purely looked at the arguments from both sides without looking at the bigger picture, one person was clearly right. Like, okay, it's better not to do this feature because from an engineering point of view, it'll take far too much time. It'll worsen other parts of the code base. We'll have to use another third-party service that we really shouldn't be using, blah, blah, blah. And we agree that that's the better decision. But if you take a step back and you realize that our business's livelihood depends on doing this feature, then, well, suddenly, there's an additional argument for doing that feature. So, got to take a step back sometimes and realize that your organization or your team might have priorities that trump some of the arguments at the purely engineering level. And then, finally, the third part of this process or system that I've got in place, and I think this one is, again, based on a Amazon leadership principle, or not necessarily based, but I think they have a leadership principle that's similar, is that you want to strongly disagree, you want to do everything that I said, dissect each other's ideas, all of that, but once it comes to making a decision, you have to commit to the decision that gets made. Once a decision is made, rather, you have to commit to that decision. You can't hold grudges, especially if the decision doesn't go your way. If it goes your way, then obviously you'll be happy. But if it doesn't go your way, you have to be able to accept that. You have to commit to the decision that was made, and you have to move forward as if that had been your decision to make sure that the product and the team and everything just goes smoothly. And of course, I guess here I skipped over one step, which is, like, how do you make the decision? Because sometimes someone will change their mind, and that's great. You'll make the decision, everybody will be happy. But other times, despite all of the arguing and dissecting people's ideas and all that, you still will have a big disagreement. People will still not agree to agree with each other. And in that case, you really have two options. Either you do a majority vote, you vote to see what decision should be made, and that can work very well. Or you escalate the decision to a decision maker. Typically, that will be someone who's previously appointed, like a manager or your manager's manager, maybe your team lead, tech lead, whatever you want to call it, and they have to make the decision. If you do escalate to a decision maker, you have to make sure, if they weren't part of the disagreement, that they get the full context. You have to present them with all the arguments and everything to make sure that they make a sound decision. But once the decision is made, like I said, commit to the decision. And yeah, this is how I've handled most, if not all, of my disagreements at work, and how I plan to continue handling disagreements at work.